truth is that I sometimes shy away from cute looking games. Chances are that's just me judging a book by its cover, but that largely has to do with a lot of cute looking games leaning more towards being casual. There's nothing wrong with casual games, especially since I greatly enjoy some on a regular basis, but it's different when it comes to those on console/PC. Thankfully, that wasn't the case with Grapple Dogs Cosmic Canines. GP has a really cute art style and I like that. It shouldn't be surprising to say that its cutscenes offered more of that. While I did enjoy the cutscenes, at times I felt that they were longer than I expected them to be. Simply put, I wanted to start playing. That feeling eventually paid off because GP features colorful levels with nice themes that match up in multiple ways. Some examples: a 1940s themed level that was black and white with cats, a rhythm-based music level, and a few, if I remember correctly, that were kind of nature-based. It helped that these levels were parts of specific themed biomes. They weren't alike to the point where they were like individual slices of a pie. This aspect of GP was handled well enough and was one part of its overall variety, something I'll eventually get into. I'm fairly sure that I said something along the lines of, GP is like a mix of your favorite 90s platformers. It largely has to do with the fact that this is a platformer kind of game, but also because it clearly wears its influences on its sleeve. At times, Mega Man and Sonic came to mind. Not only because they're also platformers, but also because of specific moments such as boss fights or progressing through GP's levels. There were parts and levels where I was able to go faster than I expected, and that offered a small taste of what Sonic levels such as Chemical Plant have to offer. The themed levels also had a lot to do with me being reminded of Mega Man. Each biome offered levels where different guns/abilities were introduced, such as a fire dash, a gun that plants grass for you to climb onto, and being able to move around specific areas thanks to electric rolls. Each offered something interesting worth mentioning, but the fire dash especially stood out to me. It's because even though it can be used for a while, which initially made me think that it was overpowered, later on I realized that waterfalls were part of these levels in order to prevent you from advancing. This was done as a way to balance things out, and I liked that. In general, I was satisfied with GP's movement and the different ways it was possible to move/platform around. I thought it featured good control over jumping. I could perform short or high jumps depending on how hard I pressed. I realized that should be a given as it's one of the most basic mechanics that could be encountered in a game. While that's true, getting this wrong or just right can greatly affect how movement comes off, especially in a platformer. While I was generally satisfied with this, at times getting around in GP felt stiff. I felt this way especially since both characters had different moves and abilities. With the regular looking dog character, it's possible to bounce/stomp around, along with other sorts of mechanics that are unlocked/encountered later on. With the gray looking dog, it was possible to dash. The truth is that I would have liked to have been able to Frankenstein a character that had a little of both playable characters. That would have greatly changed GP, since each character has separate levels. This made it possible to experience both characters and what they had to offer. It was clear that each had its pros and cons, but not to the point where I can confidently say that I preferred character A over character B. On the bright side, they each had grappling hooks that made swinging around possible. Then again, the game is titled Grapple Dogs. Besides what I already mentioned of GP's levels, I felt that they weren't really hard. What caught me a bit off guard was how they were longer than I expected them to be. At times this was frustrating because finding specific collectibles was necessary in order to progress to the next area/biome. Since some of these levels were bigger than I expected them to be, it wasn't easy finding each and every collectible. At one point I thought it was nice to be able to advance without finding them at all, but in the back of my mind I felt like not collecting them all would come back to haunt me. That wasn't as big of an issue as I thought it would be, but there were moments where I had to put in more effort than I felt was necessary to find all of a level's collectibles and be able to move on. If anything, this, alongside time trials, side quests, and more optional content adds more replay value. I'm not a completionist, so that doesn't completely apply to me. One part of GP that I've yet to discuss is its bosses. I felt that their difficulty level was just right. There were times where it would take me 2 or 3 attempts to take down a boss, but they were nowhere near as hard as some bosses in Soulsborne/like games. In particular, I liked how the final boss forced me to play as both characters, but at separate times. I thought that this was a good decision to include both rather than choosing one over the other. It allowed for more varied gameplay, but it was also a good way to offer more of a challenge. Each character had their own strengths and weaknesses, so that was front and center during this section of the game. I feel like I haven't gone super in depth with Grapple Dogs Cosmic Canines as I do with other games. For the most part, I'd say it's because what you see is largely what you get. It's a cute looking fantasy platformer that makes use of different abilities/powers. That description may be too minimalizing, and some might even think I'm referring to Super Mario, but that's what I got out of my time spent with GP. It's not the kind of game where I see myself coming back to it, such as with other platformers like Cuphead or Super Mario World. Still, every game doesn't need to be like that in order to be seen as good/successful. Like I've mentioned in past reviews, sometimes a game is a one-and-done kind. It's cool for a game to offer endless replay value, but it's also okay for a game to offer solid entertainment meant for X number of hours. Chances are that everyone won't agree with that belief, but that's also okay. If it isn't clear by now, I recommend Grapple Dogs Cosmic Canines. It's the kind of game that has wide-ranging appeal, and that's great. Do you mind playing cute-looking games? What are your thoughts about having to play as multiple characters in a game? If you enjoyed this content, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Thank you very much for watching.